Everyone is talking about the new ransom note. Nobody is asking why it arrived the exact day Savannah Guthrie returned to television. And almost no one is asking what was already moving on the Bitcoin blockchain before that note was even written. Day 67. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. There is still no named suspect. But as of April 7th, the FBI publicly confirmed for the first time that tracing cryptocurrency transactions is now a key part of their investigation. They did not say what they found. They did not say where the trail leads. They said it is a key part of the search. Federal investigators do not use language like that by accident. If you are new to this channel, subscribe before we go any further. We stay on these cases until there is a resolution. And this one is nowhere close. Here's what you need to know. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, with limited mobility, a pacemaker, and daily medication she cannot safely miss, disappeared from her home in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona. Most coverage says she went missing on February 1st. That is not quite right. She disappeared the evening of January 31st. Her family reported her missing the following morning, when she failed to appear for an online church service she attended every week. That distinction matters. The crime window is narrower than most reporting suggests. Her blood was confirmed on the front porch. Her medication sat untouched on the table. She was taken in her pajamas, without her shoes. A camera at her front door recorded an armed, masked figure at 1:47 in the morning on February 1st. The individual wore a ski mask, carried a holstered pistol, and moved through the property with a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack. The camera was then disabled. 3 other cameras were recovered by the FBI. They hold footage from the weeks before her disappearance. Nothing useful from the night itself. The total reward stands at more than $1.2 million. $100,000 from the FBI. $1 million from the family. That is the case in under 2 minutes. Now here is what this video is actually about. Shortly after Nancy vanished, ransom notes demanding Bitcoin began arriving at news outlets. One reached Cold TV in Tucson, a local CBS affiliate, within 48 hours. Investigators reviewed it, took it seriously, shared it directly with the FBI. Authorities would not confirm whether it was authentic, but they did not dismiss it. Then, sometime in the second week of February, activity appeared on a Bitcoin wallet listed in one of those notes. Funds moved into that address. Who sent them? Where the money went after? Whether federal agents have already traced that movement back to a real name, none of that has been made public. There is one detail in how the FBI chose to announce this Bitcoin investigation: the timing, the specific wording that most coverage walked straight past. We will get to it, but to understand what it means, we need to start at the moment those first notes arrived, because the person who wrote them may have believed they were invisible. And that assumption may be the only place this entire investigation finds its answer. Every Bitcoin transaction ever made is still on the blockchain, not archived, not recoverable on request. Still there, right now, accessible to anyone with the right tools. This is not a feature that criminals understand until it is too late. When investigators dismantled Silk Road in 2013, the largest anonymous criminal marketplace in internet history, they did not break the encryption. They followed the Bitcoin. Every payment, every withdrawal, every movement of funds across thousands of wallets. All of it preserved on a public ledger that no one had thought to hide, because no one believed anyone would look that carefully. That is the same ledger the FBI is working through right now in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The ransom notes began arriving within 48 hours of the night she was taken. The first reached Cold TV, the CBS affiliate in Tucson, demanding a Bitcoin payment in exchange for her release. The station reviewed the letter, passed it directly to the FBI. Investigators took it seriously enough to do exactly that. That detail is confirmed. What the note contained, beyond the payment demand, has not been fully disclosed. The question is not whether the FBI can trace Bitcoin. They can. The question, the one this entire investigation turns on, is whether the people who sent those notes understood that listing a wallet address meant handing federal agents a thread that leads backward through every transaction that address has ever touched. Ari Redbord is not a tech commentator who covers cryptocurrency news on television. He is a former federal prosecutor and a former senior official at the United States Treasury, a man who spent years building criminal cases around digital financial crimes at the highest levels of the federal government. He now serves as the global head of policy at TRM Labs, one of the blockchain intelligence firms that federal agencies rely on when they need to trace exactly this kind of movement. When Redbord states that the FBI considers the Bitcoin trace their best lead in this case, that is not opinion. He has direct operational knowledge of how these investigations work. His assessment: The Bureau is using blockchain analysis tools to track the movement of Bitcoin ransom funds, with the goal of identifying the individuals involved by linking cryptocurrency addresses to known threat actors. Known threat actors. That is a specific term. It means the FBI is not watching these wallets in isolation. They are cross-referencing movement against a database of addresses already tied to criminal networks. There is one detail in the original note, the one cold TV received, that a retired FBI official flagged publicly, and that almost no subsequent coverage has returned to. The note used the term USD rather than dollars. An American, according to that official, would be unlikely to write it that way. It is a small thing, the kind of thing that gets lost in a story with this many moving parts. Forensic linguists do not lose things like that. There is one specific moment in the blockchain record for that wallet, confirmed by Fortune in early February, that changes the texture of this entire investigation. Not because of how much money moved, because of when. Sometime in the second week of February, more than 2 months before the FBI went public, with any of this funds arrived in the wallet address listed in that ransom note. Fortune confirmed it. TMZ reported it first. Nancy had been missing less than 14 days. The question federal investigators would ask immediately is not whether the money is there. It is, who sent it, and why? There are 3 realistic possibilities. The family sent it as a negotiation attempt, or under law enforcement guidance. The FBI sent it as a controlled operation, to activate the wallet and monitor where the funds move next. Or someone entirely unconnected sent it, which would mean that wallet was already circulating in criminal networks before most news outlets had even confirmed its existence. The family has not confirmed any payment. The FBI has not confirmed any controlled operation. No official has said publicly what that transaction represents. Bezalel Athan Raviv, the founder and CEO of Lionsgate Network, a blockchain forensics firm that specializes in cryptocurrency asset recovery, was asked directly about the wallet activity. His assessment: a Bitcoin address alone does not reveal who controls it, but blockchain forensics firms are typically able to find clues that point to the owner's location. In many cases, the wallet will list transactions tied to a regulated exchange or a known criminal cluster, and that third party may hold identifying data. His recommendation was direct. Pay the ransom note. Use the blockchain to identify the account. The trail is there. But here is where it gets more complicated. And this is the part most coverage stops short of explaining. Criminals who use Bitcoin for ransom know it is traceable. They have known this for years, which is why the more sophisticated among them use mixing services tools that receive Bitcoin from multiple wallets, shuffle it through a pool of transactions, and release it from a different address on the other side. The movement is still visible on the blockchain, but the direct line between sender and recipient is deliberately broken. Jennifer Coffindaffer is not a podcast host with a passing interest in crime. She is a former special agent with the FBI, a woman who spent her career inside federal criminal investigations. She has said publicly that cyber specialists are likely collaborating with private blockchain firms to follow the ransom note angle, and that hiding a wallet through a VPN, an out-of-country email, and public Wi-Fi is, in her own words, a recipe for an extremely difficult journey. Not impossible, extremely difficult. The FBI announced this Bitcoin investigation publicly on April 7th, not in February, when the wallet had activity, not in March, when the investigation went quiet. April 7th, one day before Savannah Guthrie returned to television. The question that has not been answered: why announce it at that exact moment, after weeks of silence on this specific thread? Federal investigators do not make public disclosures about active investigative methods without a reason. They are not saying they have a name. They are not saying they do not. They are not confirming whether the wallet is linked to actual kidnappers or to someone exploiting the case. They are saying nothing. And in this investigation, that specific nothing is a choice. There are now multiple ransom notes. At least one has been confirmed fake. It led directly to the arrest of the sender. The authenticity of every other note remains officially unconfirmed. Not denied, unconfirmed. When investigators decline to authenticate a specific document in a live case, especially one receiving this level of national attention, they are not communicating failure. They are protecting a thread. And a thread, in a blockchain investigation, is exactly what it sounds like. Coffindaffer has said it plainly. Bitcoin is highly traceable. To convert it to US dollars requires a regulated financial institution. That institution requires identity verification, and the blockchain records every step between the wallet and that institution. The most recent note sent to TMZ on the same day Savannah Guthrie walked back onto the Today Show set for the first time in over 2 months, contained two things none of the previous notes had included: a specific geographic location, and a claim that Nancy is no longer alive. Neither has been confirmed, neither has been denied. And here is the detail that reshapes the shape of this entire case. At 2:30 in the morning on February 1st, 43 minutes after a masked, armed man appeared on camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door, her pacemaker disconnected from her phone, not because of a medical event, because she was out of range. Bluetooth range on a paired cardiac device is approximately 10 meters. She was not out of range inside her own home. She was already gone. 43 minutes. That is the actual crime window. 1:47 in the morning, a figure in a ski mask, holstered pistol, 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack appears at the front door. Moves deliberately, does not run, methodically engages the camera. 2:30 in the morning, the pacemaker signal drops. But the pacemaker detail is not just a timestamp, it is a question. A cardiac device paired to a phone communicates continuously via Bluetooth. Certain models send alerts to remote monitoring services when the pairing breaks unexpectedly. If her pacemaker dropped signal and did not reconnect, that absence is, in theory, detectable by the phone, by the monitoring service, potentially by the cellular network. Did the person who took Nancy Guthrie know about the pacemaker? If they did, this is someone who researched her, not casually. Specifically, who knew about a wireless medical device that communicates with her phone, and possibly with external monitoring services. The same person who disabled her front doorbell camera, who may have been responsible for what investigators confirmed was a power and internet disruption. Near her home that morning, a utility box around the corner showing signs of tampering. Sheriff Nanos confirmed that investigators were examining a potential outage at the time of the abduction. He declined to directly connect it to the crime. Consider what it would mean if they are connected. Cut the internet connection before entering. The cameras cannot upload footage to cloud backup. Disable the front doorbell. The most visible recording device is gone. Enter during the 43-minute window. Exit before dawn. This is not the behavioral profile of an impulsive act. Sheriff Nanos said it publicly. He believes this suspect could absolutely strike again. That warning does not describe someone acting randomly on one night. It describes someone with demonstrated operational planning and the capability to repeat it. The FBI released surveillance footage on February 10th, released personally by FBI Director Kash Patel, showing the individual at the front door of the property. 5'9" to 5'10", average build, eyes visible through the holes of a ski mask. Moving with purpose, not urgency. The camera interference happened methodically. This was someone who had considered that camera before they arrived. Here is what we know about the cameras on that property, and why this specific detail matters. The front doorbell camera was physically removed. It is missing from the property. 3 other cameras, positioned at the front entrance area, the driveway, and the backyard, were collected by the FBI as evidence. Those cameras hold footage from the days and weeks before February 1st. There is no footage from the night itself. Home security cameras operate in one of 2 ways. They record to local storage, a hard drive or memory card physically inside the device, or a local recording unit inside the home. Or they record to cloud storage, uploading continuously to a remote server via the internet connection. If those cameras were recording locally, and the internet connection to the property was cut before the footage uploaded, that footage may still exist, on a physical drive, somewhere, in a house that was released as a crime scene less than 24 hours after Nancy was reported missing. Anonymous law enforcement sources, as reported by News Nation, have alleged that the initial supervisor assigned to this investigation had never worked a homicide case before being placed in this role. Sheriff Nanos has directly denied that characterization, but Coffindaffer has said it without qualification. You cannot get a crime scene back. You cannot recover the first 48 hours. Those losses are permanent. If those cameras were on local storage, and the scene was released before that storage was fully examined, the footage may be gone, or it may still be in that house, waiting on a drive that no one has asked about publicly. Think about what you would do if you were running this investigation and you found out those cameras recorded locally. Drop that in the comments, because there is no clean answer, and no official has addressed it. If you want to follow this case as it develops, subscribe now and turn on notifications. We cover this investigation every time it moves, and it is about to move again. Because the DNA found at the scene is not giving investigators a single clean profile, there are multiple contributors, and that raises the one question that has been sitting underneath all of this from the very beginning. Was there more than one person inside that house on the night of January 31st? There is a detail in how the FBI framed its canvassing request in early February that almost no coverage returned to. When the Pima County Sheriff's Department asked residents near the Catalina Foothills home to submit surveillance footage, they did not ask for footage from the night of January 31st. They asked for footage spanning January 1st through February 2nd, a full 33 days. That is not a standard missing person canvass. That is a pre-crime reconnaissance search. Someone may have visited that neighborhood before the night of the abduction. Not once, multiple times. Enough times that investigators believed a month's worth of security footage from nearby homes might show a pattern. A theory has circulated among investigators and analysts reported by IB Times, though not officially confirmed, that the suspect may have spent up to 20 hours watching the property before acting. Not lurking outside the front door, positioning, observing, timing, learning when the lights went off, learning when traffic slowed on the street, learning the rhythm of the house. If that is accurate, the person who took Nancy Guthrie did not simply arrive at 1:47 in the morning and improvise. They arrived knowing what they would find. The FBI has not confirmed the 20-hour figure. What they have confirmed, through their own public canvass request, is that they believe something was happening in that neighborhood before the night in question. And that 33-day window is the shape of what they are looking for. There is one detail from the pre-abduction footage collected from those 3 property cameras, the ones recovered by the FBI, but not publicly released, that investigators have not spoken about at all. Not to confirm it shows something. Not to confirm it shows nothing. Silence on footage that covers weeks of activity at a property that became a crime scene is not neutral. That is the specific kind of silence that tends to precede a disclosure. Now, back to the Bitcoin. Because understanding what the FBI is actually doing with that blockchain data requires understanding one thing that most coverage gets wrong about cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is not anonymous. It was never designed to be. It is pseudonymous, meaning transactions are tied to wallet addresses, not to names. But the addresses are public. The transaction history is public. And every movement of funds, from the moment a wallet is created to the moment funds leave it for the last time, is recorded permanently on a ledger that any forensic analyst in the world can access. The wallet listed in the initial ransom note is, right now, visible to anyone who knows the address. The FBI knows the address. TRM Labs, Chainalysis, Lionsgate network firms that specialize in exactly this kind of trace have already spoken publicly about what is possible. The movement that occurred in that wallet in the second week of February is on the record. It cannot be deleted. What forensic blockchain analysts look for first is clustering. Most people who use cryptocurrency do not maintain perfect operational separation between wallets. They reuse addresses. They move funds between wallets in patterns that reflect habitual behavior. A transfer at a certain time of day, using a certain denomination, routed through a specific sequence of intermediate addresses. These are fingerprints. Not in the metaphorical sense, in the forensic sense. The second thing they look for is the exit point. At some stage, Bitcoin must leave the blockchain ecosystem and enter the conventional financial system. That requires a regulated exchange. Every major exchange operating globally is subject to know your customer requirements, identity verification, address confirmation, in some cases, government ID. The moment ransom funds touch a regulated off-ramp, they carry a name. The name may be false. The documentation may be forged. But it exists. And the blockchain shows exactly which exchange was used. Coffindaffer put it plainly. To convert Bitcoin to US dollars, the blockchain provides clues. Those clues could identify someone associated with the account. Whether or not that person physically entered Nancy Guthrie's home, they are a thread. And federal agents follow threads. The DNA problem, however, is something different entirely. Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed that biological material recovered from the scene contains more than 2 distinct DNA profiles, layered over each other, in what analysts describe as a complex mixture. Coffindaffer has said that performing investigative genetic genealogy on a sample like that, technique that has broken cold cases by identifying suspects through family tree databases is, in her assessment, near impossible at that level of complexity. The profiles cannot be cleanly separated. Submitting them to CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database, requires a workable profile. A mixture this contaminated may not produce one. This is not a lab delay. This is a fundamental forensic limitation. But here is what that limitation implies, if you think about it carefully. A clean DNA profile from a single suspect at a crime scene requires that suspect to have acted alone, or to have left biological material that was not immediately contaminated by other contributors. Multiple profiles in a mixed sample suggest multiple individuals moved through that space, not necessarily on the same night, not necessarily together, but the evidence, as it stands, cannot rule out the involvement of more than one person. On February 13th, the Pima County Sheriff's Department executed what appeared to be a significant operation. They moved on a property approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. Roads were closed for roughly 4 hours. 2 individuals were removed from the residence. One was taken in for questioning. He was released the following day. He identified himself publicly only as Carlos. He said he did not know who Nancy Guthrie was. He said he hoped the real suspect would be found. Investigators offered no further public explanation for why he was brought in, why he was released, or what, if anything, was determined during that questioning. A gray Range Rover in a nearby Culver's parking lot was seized and towed away around the same time. No public explanation has been offered for what investigators found or did not find in that vehicle. Law enforcement also recovered gloves approximately 2 miles from the property. Initial testing indicated the DNA on those gloves belonged to an unknown male. That was before the results came back fully. The DNA was eventually traced to a local restaurant worker, who was cleared and described by the sheriff as not part of the investigation. 3 separate developments in the same window, a property 2 miles away, a vehicle in a nearby parking lot, gloves with male DNA, all within the same geographic radius, all investigated, none of them leading anywhere publicly confirmed. That is a significant amount of activity for an investigation with no named suspect. Now, there is something that has been treated as a procedural footnote in most coverage, but that former federal investigators have called one of the most consequential failures in a case like this. Anonymous law enforcement sources, as reported by News Nation, alleged that the supervisor placed in charge of the initial response to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance had never previously investigated a homicide before taking that role. Sheriff Nanos denied this account directly and forcefully. He defended his team. He cited the unit's record on prior cases. But Coffindaffer did not frame her criticism around the supervisor specifically. She framed it around what cannot be undone. You cannot recover a crime scene after it has been released. You cannot return to the first 48 hours. Those hours, the window when biological material is freshest, when trace evidence is most intact, when witness memory is sharpest, are gone permanently. That is not a question of personnel. It is a question of what was preserved and what was not. The crime scene, according to those same anonymous sources, was released less than 24 hours after Nancy was reported missing. That is 1 day. In a case involving confirmed bloodstains, a missing 84-year-old woman with a life-sustaining pacemaker, evidence of forced removal, and signs of deliberate infrastructure tampering. 1 day. Nanos has not confirmed the timeline of when the scene was released. He has not denied it. That specific nothing is not nothing. The ransom notes add a different layer of complexity, not because they are credible or not credible, because investigators cannot publicly establish either. One note has been confirmed fake. The person who sent it was arrested. But for every other note received by Cold TV, TMZ, and other outlets, the FBI has neither authenticated nor dismissed them. They reviewed the original cold letter. They took it seriously. They shared it with federal investigators. That is all that is on the record. When criminal investigators in a live case decline to authenticate a document publicly, they are not communicating confusion. They are protecting an active investigative thread. Authentication, in the wrong hands, confirms to the sender that they have been noticed. Non-authentication keeps every possible avenue open. The most recent set of notes sent to TMZ, and reportedly from the same author as earlier correspondence offered to deliver the kidnappers, in the sender's own framing, on a silver platter, in exchange for 1 Bitcoin, roughly $34,000 to $70,000, depending on market rate at the time. The sender claims to have seen Nancy Guthrie in Sonora, Mexico. The sender claims she has died. Neither claim has been confirmed. Neither has been denied. Nancy Guthrie attended her daughter Annie's home on the afternoon of January 31st. She was driven back to her own house that evening. She had a routine, church online every week, visits to family, a home in a quiet, unincorporated neighborhood where she had lived long enough that neighbors had put signs of support in their yards by the time cameras arrived. An 84-year-old woman taken in the dark, in her pajamas, without her shoes, without the medication her heart requires. A word in the comments doesn't change what happened, but it reminds the algorithm and everyone watching that this is a real person, not a case number. If you're praying for Nancy and her family today, leave one word below. Amen. Anything. Because she deserves to be found, and someone out there knows exactly where she is. There are now two separate threads in this investigation that involve digital evidence: the Bitcoin blockchain and whatever the FBI recovered from those 3 property cameras in the weeks before the abduction. Neither thread has produced a public result. Both remain active, and there is now a new note, one with a specific location, a death claim, and timing that Coffindaffer called deliberate sitting at the center of whatever comes next. Because that note did not arrive randomly. It arrived the same day Savannah Guthrie walked back into the studio, for the first time in more than 2 months, on national television, in front of millions of people, and whoever sent that note was watching. The question is what they were watching for. On April 6th, Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show set for the first time in more than 2 months. She had stepped away from her role at NBC the morning after her mother disappeared. She had spent 65 days doing what families in these cases do, coordinating with investigators, making public appeals, waiting. On April 6th, she walked back in front of the cameras. Within hours, a new note arrived at TMZ. The following morning, April 7th, the FBI publicly acknowledged for the first time that tracing Bitcoin transactions is a key part of their active investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. 3 events, 3 consecutive days, each one appearing to respond to the one before it. Federal investigators do not announce active investigative methods without calculating the effect of that announcement. They do not go public about a specific forensic approach, blockchain analysis, a tool that works precisely because the subject does not know they are being watched unless the disclosure serves a purpose. The question is what that purpose is. And the question sitting directly underneath it, did the new ransom note, arriving the same day Savannah returned to television, trigger something in the investigation that made disclosure necessary? The note itself, according to TMZ, is unlike the ones that preceded it. Previous correspondents demanded large sums, $6 million in Bitcoin, in exchange for Nancy's release. This note asked for something different. 1 Bitcoin, roughly $34,000 to $70,000, depending on market conditions. Not in exchange for Nancy, in exchange for information about who took her. The sender claims to know the identity of the kidnappers, claims to be in a position to deliver them, claims additionally that Nancy Guthrie has died, and claims to have seen her in Sonora, Mexico. Here is what we know with certainty. The note was received by TMZ on April 6th. Coffindaffer, former special agent, FBI, responded to it publicly, on the record, calling the timing deliberate and the act sadistic. The Pima County Sheriff's Office has said publicly that all tips and leads are taken seriously and passed directly to detectives working with the FBI. That is confirmed. The FBI publicly announced the Bitcoin trace on April 7th. That is confirmed. Here is what remains reported but unconfirmed, because you deserve to know the difference. The specific claim that Nancy was seen in Sonora, Mexico. The claim that she has died. Whether this note was written by the same person who sent previous correspondence. Whether federal investigators consider this note credible. Whether the 1 Bitcoin demand is being treated as a legitimate offer of information or as an extortion attempt by someone with no direct knowledge of the case. None of that has been officially confirmed. Not by the FBI. Not by the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Not by the family. What Coffindaffer has said publicly is worth sitting with. She called the timing no mistake. She said, the fact that a new ransom demand is arriving now, after Savannah appeared, is a complete gut punch. She used the word sadistic. She also said something else. She said pay it. Not because the money matters, because the blockchain does not lie. 1 Bitcoin sent to a specific wallet address leaves a trail. That trail leads to an exchange, or to a cluster, or to a pattern. And that pattern leads to a name. Now here is the detail at the center of this peak that has not been publicly resolved. On April 6th, a note arrived at TMZ. That note was reportedly from the same author as a series of earlier notes, an individual who has, across multiple pieces of correspondence, claimed knowledge of the kidnappers, knowledge of Nancy's location, and now claimed knowledge of her death. Each successive note has escalated. Each one has arrived at a moment of heightened public visibility in this case. The first notes arrived within days of the abduction. One arrived around the time the FBI released surveillance footage in February. And this most recent one arrived the exact hour, or within hours, of Savannah Guthrie's return to national television. This is the question no investigator has answered publicly. Is the person sending these notes responding to news coverage? Or are they watching something more specific? The family's movements, their public-facing decisions, the timing of when Savannah chooses to speak, or act, or appear. Because those are two very different things. Someone monitoring news coverage is dangerous in one way. Someone monitoring the family directly is dangerous in a fundamentally different way. And the FBI, in choosing to go public about the Bitcoin trace the day after this note arrived, may have made a calculation about which one of those is actually true. Think about that carefully. Drop your read on it in the comments. Because investigators have not said, and the two possibilities lead to completely different places. If you want to be here when this investigation surfaces its next development, subscribe now and turn on notifications. When the blockchain trace produces a result, we will cover it same day. That is not a promise we make lightly. Now, consider the Bitcoin wallet itself. There is activity on record confirmed by Fortune in February in the wallet address listed in that initial cold TV ransom note. Someone sent funds into that address. The blockchain recorded it. The recording is permanent. Federal analysts have had access to that record for more than 2 months before the FBI went public with any of it. In blockchain forensics, what investigators look for in a case like this is not just where the money went. They look for what else those wallets have done. A wallet that received ransom funds may have also transacted with a darknet marketplace 2 months earlier, may share an origin address with a wallet tied to a known criminal network, may have touched a regulated exchange that holds identity documents. Each connection is a node. Each node is a direction. The FBI is not watching one wallet. They are mapping a network, and they have been doing it quietly, without public disclosure, since February. The announcement on April 7th, 2 months into that process, is not the beginning of this investigation. It may be closer to the end of a phase. The silence that has surrounded this case for the past several weeks is not the silence of an investigation with nothing to report. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has deliberately reduced the frequency of public briefings. Former Special Agent Brianna Fox described the public-facing investigation as an iceberg. What is visible represents the smallest fraction of what is actually happening. The rest, she said, is below the surface, and they keep it there on purpose. They are not saying they have a suspect. They are not saying they do not. They are not saying the Bitcoin trail is warm. They are not saying it has gone cold. They are saying, with precision, that blockchain analysis is a key part of an active search. And in that specific phrasing, there is enough to work with. That is where this case stands on day 67. No suspect has been named. Tens of thousands of leads remain in active review. DNA collected at the scene is too complex to analyze through standard genealogical methods, multiple profiles, layered over each other in a mixture that forensic specialists describe as near impossible to cleanly separate. A suspect described as 5'9" to 5'10", carrying a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack, has not been publicly identified, despite weeks of national attention and a combined reward of more than $1.2 million. The total reward, $100,000 from the FBI, $1 million from the family, remains unclaimed. There is a fact about this case that gets reported. And then there is the weight of it. On the afternoon of January 31st, Nancy Guthrie visited her daughter Annie. She was driven home that evening. She made it back. Her house was quiet. Her medication was on the table. Her phone was charging. And sometime in the hours that followed after 1:47 in the morning, before 2:30, someone entered that house and took her out of it in the dark, in her pajamas, without her shoes, without the medication her heart requires to function. Savannah Guthrie said it in an interview with Hoda Kotb. "I imagine her terror every night." That sentence is not metaphor. It is a daughter describing the specific nightly experience of not knowing where her mother is, of imagining what those first moments were like for an 84-year-old woman taken from her own bed, without warning, in the middle of the night. That detail, the pajamas, the missing shoes, the medication left behind, belongs in every conversation about this investigation, not as evidence. As the human reality underneath the evidence, two questions remain without official answers. First, the Bitcoin trail. The blockchain is active, the analysis is ongoing. If that trail connects to a regulated exchange, federal investigators may already have a name attached to a wallet. They have not said. Second, the DNA, multiple profiles at a single crime scene. If those profiles represent multiple individuals who cannot currently be separated through standard genealogical analysis, what happened in that house, and who was involved, may be more complex than any single suspect theory accounts for. Neither question has been closed. Both are driving an investigation that has, by the FBI's own acknowledgement, prioritized a technology that records everything and forgets nothing. The blockchain is still running. The analysis continues. And on day 67, that specific trail, the one agents are quietly, methodically following through every wallet cluster, and every exchange touchpoint remains the closest thing this investigation has to a door that might actually open. The thing about cases like this one is that the technology is always moving faster than the public conversation about it. What is happening right now in the Nancy Guthrie investigation? The blockchain analysis, the wallet tracing, the cross-referencing of transaction clusters against known criminal networks is not exceptional. It is standard practice in federal cryptocurrency investigations. What is exceptional is that most people watching this case have no framework for understanding what that actually means. And without that framework, the FBI's announcement on April 7th reads like a bureaucratic update. It is not. It is a disclosure about a forensic method that has dismantled criminal networks that believed they were untouchable. Here is what the blockchain cannot do. It cannot be erased. Every transaction recorded on a public ledger is permanent, not stored on a central server that can be subpoenaed and wiped, but distributed across thousands of nodes simultaneously. There is no single point of deletion. When investigators talk about following the Bitcoin trail in this case, they are not describing a search for data that might have been destroyed. They are describing a process of reading a record that has been sitting in plain view since the moment those funds moved. Here is what the blockchain can do that most people do not understand. It can establish behavioral patterns across time. A wallet that received funds in the second week of February did not appear out of nowhere. It has a history. Every wallet does. That history includes when it was created, what other addresses it has interacted with, whether it has touched exchanges that hold identity documents, and whether it clusters with addresses already flagged by federal agencies as connected to criminal activity. Forensic analysts do not look at one transaction, they map a network. And networks, unlike individual wallets, are much harder to sanitize. The criminal psychology of this specific case is worth understanding separately from the blockchain mechanics. Whoever planned what happened at that house on the Catalina foothills on the night of January 31st demonstrated a level of operational preparation that is consistent with prior planning and target selection. The camera interference was not reactive. The utility disruption was not opportunistic. The choice of victim, an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility, daily medication dependence, and a predictable weekly routine reflects someone who had identified a specific vulnerability and calculated how to exploit it. That is not a profile built in one evening. That is a profile built over time. The ransom demand in Bitcoin reflects the same calculation. Cryptocurrency was chosen because it feels anonymous. The channel was chosen news outlets rather than direct family contact because it creates media pressure while maintaining distance. The timing of subsequent notes, including the most recent one arriving the same day Savannah returned to television, reflects ongoing monitoring of public information and deliberate escalation. These are not the patterns of someone acting impulsively. They are the patterns of someone managing a communication strategy. What that strategy does not account for is the blockchain, because the blockchain records the strategy too. If you have an elderly parent or relative living alone, there are two things this case makes relevant right now. First, ensure any home security cameras are set to cloud backup with continuous upload, not local storage only. A camera that records to a hard drive inside the home can be neutralized by cutting power or internet before it uploads. A camera backed up to the cloud in real time is a different problem for someone planning an entry. Second, establish a daily check-in system with a specific trigger, not a text that gets missed, but a scheduled call or alert that escalates automatically if it is not acknowledged. Nancy Guthrie's absence was not detected until she missed a church service. A routine check-in with a defined response window is the difference between a 12-hour gap and a 4-hour one. The Guthrie family has done everything publicly available to them. They have offered more than $1.2 million in combined reward. They have made direct public appeals. They have stayed in contact with investigators. They have waited. 67 days of waiting, with no answer about where she is or what happened after 2:30 in the morning on February 1st. That patience has a weight to it, and it is worth naming. Subscribe if you are following this case. Turn on notifications. When the Bitcoin trace produces a result, when the FBI's blockchain mapping connects to a name or an exchange or a network, we will cover it the same day it breaks. This investigation is not over. The evidence has not gone cold. And there are still two questions without public answers: where that blockchain trail ends, and what the DNA mixture at the scene says about how many people were inside that house. One question before you go. And there is no right answer here. Should investigators publicly confirm whether any payment was made to trace these wallets, or does that transparency cost them the lead? Leave your read on that below, because nobody in this case has answered it. And the difference between those two choices may be the difference between this trail going somewhere and going dark. The blockchain is still running, the FBI is still searching, and Nancy Guthrie is still missing.